the general manager of the Los Angeles Lakers, Rob Pelinka, who discussed.
I wish I could send that text out to everyone.
He discussed why they took Bronny James, all the positives that come along with it, and really tried to sell everybody on the idea of Bronny James going 55 overall, why that was the pick for the Lakers.
In the history of the NBA, there's never been a father and a son that have shared an NBA basketball court. And that feels like something that could be magical. And we know and have to respect, of course, that LeBron has a decision about his opt-out. And I'm sure he and his family and his agent will deliberate what they're going to do there. And, of course, he has freedom to decide whatever's best for him and his family. But if it worked out that he was on our team next season, NBA history could be made. And NBA history should be made in a Lakers uniform. Bronny is, first and foremost, a person of high character. And second, he is a young man that works incredibly hard. And those are the qualities we look for in drafting players and adding to our developmental core at the Lakers. He had a great draft workout with us where he displayed those qualities to me in an hour lunch that we shared in the building just to get to know each other. Became clear that he was a man of character. In terms of his work ethic, I think we've all seen that lived out too. He's not a person that has ever taken shortcuts or expected or been entitled about basketball opportunities. He's worked for everything that he's gotten, including being selected today at 55. So it's an honor for us to add him to our program. Coach Reddick is already excited about putting a development plan around him to increase his basketball skills and turn him into the player that we think can impact and help this franchise.
Do you guys want to hear my draft profile on Bronny James?
I mean, does it start off with 6 foot 1.5?
No, it's very similar to what Rob Pelinka just said. High character, hard worker, last name James. Like that's really where it comes to Bronny James and what he gets and what he's got going on for him. Like the idea.
That man said no entitlements.
Like, here's the problem, and this goes back to something that we've talked about before. I would have no issue if he came out and said, yeah, look, we want him to be able to play with his dad. Look, you guys feel how you want to feel about it. That's fine. But we as an organization want that magic and that moment to happen here with us. And that's why we made this pick, because we think there's some potential there. We're going to work with him. And hopefully that's something that can happen down the road. But instead, he's got to throw in, hard work, character, it's like all
no entitlements.
Stop.
You got to make sure you throw in no entitlements.
It's the same thing when LeBron when they try and tell people, this is not, he had no say in the JJ Redick hire. He didn't want to be involved. Stop. Like there was a story that came out that Rich Paul, LeBron's agent, was calling teams picking ahead of the Lakers in the second round, asking them not to take Bronny James because if you took him, he was just going to go play in Australia. Who was going to take him? He was not going to get drafted if the Lakers didn't take him.
That's cap. That's cap.
But they try
calling around saying don't take him. That's so cap. That's the biggest baddest cap ever in the history of biggest baddest cap. That is not true. That cannot be true at all. At what point in time? I heard Chris Broussard on one of the promos, and I love Chris. I heard him on one of the promos talking about at those points in the draft when you get a pick, your pick is generally better than that draft spot. And that might remain true here.
That was from former Warriors GM Bob Myers, who's on ESPN's NBA coverage. He's the one who said that Rich Paul is calling teams, telling them don't take Bronny James, do not take him. If you take him, he's going to Australia.
Oh man!
This
is so good. Don't take him. I'm calling, listen, I'm telling y'all, don't take this kid that's averaging 2.5 points a game. What?
Right.
He's how tall? Y'all said he's how tall? 6 what?
That would be like me. That would be like me walking up to LaVar and saying, "Hey man, whatever you do not steal my car." Or I'd be like,
exactly.
I wasn't planning on it, dude. Like,
whatever you do, don't. Like, he hit his alarm on his car one time when I was getting out. I'm like, are you? Like, first off, you don't need an alarm at all for nobody. You can take that into the PJs. Ain't nobody in the Jets taking that truck. That thing going to be right where it stayed, right there.
It would be an interesting deal to hear the other end of the line, like when they called, and they're like, hey, make sure not to take. They're probably like, right.
They was looking at the phone.
Thank you for the call.
I mean, but he made the call, so he can say he made the call.
But
thank you for letting us know.
Isn't that's what makes this nauseating to a lot of people?
That's fine, but that's the part.
Look, this is where I've been with the NBA forever. The NBA,
fair.
the entire league has allowed this to happen. This isn't like just a Lakers thing. It's not. They've allowed Clutch Sports to have the clutch on the entire league the way they do. They've allowed LeBron to do what he's done because he is one of the greatest of all time. Like, if we're being honest with ourselves, Michael Jordan probably had equal amount of power way back then. Even with a commissioner that probably wasn't as, I'm not going to say subservient like Adam Silver, but that's where we're at. Like, this league feels like they need to play into storylines like this in order to generate buzz, to generate viewership.
He said it, Q. That man, Rob Pelinka, said it. He said it out his mouth that the storyline was intriguing. You drafted this man off of a storyline? Damn. That's crazy.
But like, why are we surprised? That's where the NBA is at. And this is what happens when a league, which, I mean, I would obviously where the game and how it's being played now, I do think players are as skilled as they've ever been. But it's getting to the point where you feel like the three-point shot, something there needs to be altered. Because it feels like the game has just become kind of too spread out, too predictable in how things are going to go. And it's not as great of a product to watch anymore. I'm sorry. If NBA purists and people who are fans get upset with me for saying that, look, I love the game of basketball. But how the game is played now compared to how it was 15 years ago is dramatically different. And it doesn't feel like the same product or as entertaining. I'm sorry if you disagree with that. That's just my opinion. But I feel like viewership decline would equate to that as well because you still have stars. You still have some of these rivalries. And you could even say, well, what about these players all getting together? That's fine. Like, if you have a big 300 team, I don't care because it creates this villain almost, like where everyone expects that team to win. So if they don't, it ends up, appeasing so many other people out there. So it still creates that storyline. The problem with the NBA is they've leaned so hard into everything outside of basketball itself and these sorts of storylines. I mean, I guess you could say, hey, the NFL does it too, but not really. Once the season starts, it's the season.
It's the season.
We're not having a conversation, or we're talking in the offseason about how this move could impact their season. Like, we're not talking about some of the stuff that goes on off the field in almost any other sport but the NBA. And that's what, to me, gets a little frustrating with it is you've got as skilled of players as we've ever seen, and we haven't really figured out what to do with it to make it a bigger and better product for TV. And I guess you can sit there and say, well, even though viewership's down, networks still keep paying more money for it, so it must be more valued. I actually think it's like our society has lost so much creativity. We don't have good sitcoms anymore. Like, we have lost the ability to come up with new thoughts, new shows, new anything. And so we're reliant on like live sports. We're reliant on all that now instead of actually having a show to tune in and watch. It's like, oh no, if you don't have live sports, live news, like it's got to be some other appointment television that one of these digital streaming platforms has created because networks can't figure out how to actually write a good TV show anymore. I mean, some of the game shows that are on nowadays too, it's like, what the hell is this? It's crazy to see where things have gotten at this point as far as the NBA. But I think it's a byproduct of a lot of things, but mostly their own doing in allowing this to happen.
Those are such valid points. I mean, I think they can't keep up with how good the content creators are these days, right? They're becoming the millionaires because they're creating content that people are just really, really into and just always checking back for, and they can't keep up with it because they're small boats. They're not big ships, right? But and continuing just kind of looking at that conversation for me, just I went through the mental gymnastics of, is it fair to do a comparison of, say this was Isaiah Thomas on that Pistons team, say it was Rip Hamilton on that Pistons team that won the championship, say it was Michael Jordan, and Michael Jordan did have a son that played ball.
He did. He had two
of them.
Yeah.
Say that was the case in Chicago, and Marcus was coming out or something to that point. How would he be received by those players? How would that look if you put in, and what would, like, let's just be clear on this, an inferior player to the rest of the guys on the roster? How would they react to that? How would they handle that? If you have to cut somebody, which they're going to cut people, how are you going to react to that when that man is still on the roster? How are you going to feel internally as a team when you're sitting there and people's heads is on the chopping block and Bronny James is sitting right there in his locker, comfortable with no entitlements, hard work, and the last name James?
And think about this. Michael Jordan owned a team. This could have happened. He could have made a call and be like, hey, I own this thing. Like you're taking one of my sons. They're going to be a part of this. Never happened. That's why I would argue LeBron's probably got more power than Michael Jordan did in the NBA, because this never happened.
I said it earlier. I said he's the GOAT of GOATs in terms of business, because I'm telling you, this is like some Ocean's 12, Ocean's 11, man. He went in here and he stole it. He stole pick 55. Should be a Netflix special one day called, what is it? I don't know. Pick 55. That's what it should be called. Pick 55. I don't get it. I don't get it.
I feel like, though, the commissioners under Jordan during his era, right, which was David Stern for the end, was it Russ Granick?
I don't know.
Does that sound like who was before? Or was it Larry O'Brien? Larry O'Brien. I feel like between Larry O'Brien and David Stern, they were stronger commissioners of the NBA. And as, Michael Jordan became such a global brand, combined with Nike, that really empowered NBA basketball players to make a good portion of money, too, off the court. And even though they make a ton playing, there's also, and I keep bringing up the shoe opportunity because that's real. NBA players can make so much money on their marketing deals and globally going to China and all these different international markets, and that can line their pockets more than anything else. It's what's made Michael Jordan, a billionaire? It was his ability to help elevate Nike. Without Michael Jordan, Nike's not Nike. Like, I'm sorry. I've read Shoe Dog. I've heard Phil Knight's story. We can talk Steve Prefontaine all we want. But Michael Jordan is what made Nike Nike. And
Marcus Jordan is making bank off of being a Michael Jordan person.
Yeah,
sure.
So maybe
but you get my point,
still
right?
Michael. 100%.
It's like if you look from Larry O'Brien to David Stern and the power of the NBA back then before the shoe deals were as big.
Yeah.
But as you looked at Michael Jordan getting to the end of his career after winning 6 championships and all of that, then it became like, okay, who's the next Mike when Michael was done? Mm-hmm. And then we kept, it was LeBron and Kobe, and we looked for all these other guys, but then everyone started getting their own shoe. And that's where you kind of realize these players have leverage, because it's not just what they negotiate with their individual teams or any team in the league. It's also the money they have flown in with different sponsors, but apparel companies.
Great point. Yeah. It's a great point, man.